Pause for a moment, because something significant may have changed around you without you even realizing it. Someone in your life may have developed an intense fixation on you. And what makes this situation so unsettling is that their fascination may have very little to do with how you see yourself. Instead, it may come from the emotions and hidden feelings you unintentionally awakened within them. Once you recognize what is happening, it becomes difficult to ignore. For a long time, you may have felt invisible. You gave your energy, your attention, and your effort, yet received little in return. You kept trying to explain yourself to people who had no real desire to understand you. You searched for approval outside yourself. Then something changed. You reached an emotional limit. You stopped chasing people. You stopped explaining yourself. You stopped begging to be understood. And most importantly, you stopped looking outside yourself for your sense of worth. You began discovering your value from within. That internal transformation changed the way you carried yourself. And whether you realized it or not, someone noticed. They felt the difference. You may think attraction comes from physical appearance, shared values, timing, or simple chemistry. Those things can matter. But sometimes something much deeper is involved. Deep emotional attraction often begins beneath conscious thought. You may have touched something inside this person that they had buried for years. And that is where everything became complicated. This person may have been hiding their true feelings for a very long time. Your presence became unpredictable to them. They could no longer easily define what they felt or control how strongly they responded to you. You disrupted their emotional framework. That is something most people fail to understand. When someone feels deeply seen, not merely noticed, but genuinely understood, they may develop a powerful emotional attachment. You may have become a mirror for something inside them. You did not necessarily do this intentionally. You may not have tried to change them at all. You simply existed as yourself. And somehow, your presence revealed something they had spent years trying to hide. Now they may be replaying your most recent interaction again and again in their mind. Not because they consciously want to, because they cannot seem to stop. Their mind keeps returning to the same moments, the same words, the same looks, and the same unanswered questions. Why did this feel so different? Why did your presence affect them so deeply? Why do they feel drawn toward you while simultaneously wanting to escape? The answer may lie in unresolved emotions. Human beings often struggle most with things that remain unfinished. Unanswered questions, incomplete conversations, unresolved feelings, and emotional experiences without closure can remain active in the mind for a very long time. And you may have become connected to one of those unresolved parts of their life. You can probably sense something in the way they look at you. There may be an unusual intensity, a pause that lasts a little too long, a sudden change in their behavior, moments when they seem extremely close, followed by periods when they suddenly pull away. That contradiction is important because their confusion may not actually be about you. It may be about what you awaken inside them. One part of them wants closeness. Another part wants distance. One part wants to understand the connection. Another part is terrified of what understanding it might reveal. This is why their behavior can feel so confusing. They may approach you, then disappear. They may show interest, then become distant. They may seem emotionally open one moment and completely closed the next. This does not necessarily mean they do not care. Sometimes people withdraw precisely because they care more than they know how to handle. Your presence may have activated feelings connected to their past, their fears, their insecurities, and their deepest desires. Their conscious mind wants peace. Their deeper mind wants resolution. And those two forces are now fighting each other. So what happens next? They may create physical and emotional distance. They may tell themselves that staying away will make the feelings disappear. They may believe that time will weaken the connection. They may try to distract themselves. They may convince themselves that they imagined everything. But distance does not always eliminate emotional attachment. Sometimes distance makes it stronger. When people are separated, reality becomes mixed with imagination. The mind begins filling in the gaps. Instead of seeing the complete person, they begin remembering selected moments. They idealize, they romanticize, they replay. And slowly, the person in their mind can become more powerful than the person standing in front of them. That is when attachment becomes difficult to escape. They may no longer be attached only to who you are. They may also be attached to what you represent. You may symbolize something they lost, something they never received, something they secretly wanted, or perhaps a version of themselves they never believed they could become. And that realization can be frightening because loving someone can sometimes force a person to confront the parts of themselves they have spent years avoiding. Their emotions may therefore become a mixture of desire, fear, longing, resistance, and vulnerability. They want you, but wanting you makes them vulnerable. They feel connected to you, but connection requires openness. And openness is exactly what their emotional defenses were designed to prevent. So they remain trapped between two opposing forces. Come closer, run away. Trust, protect yourself. Open up, stay hidden. That internal conflict creates enormous pressure. Eventually, pressure demands release. Sometimes it leads to a confession. Sometimes it leads to complete withdrawal. Sometimes it produces confusing or irrational behavior. But eventually, something has to change. Because no person can indefinitely maintain an intense emotional contradiction without consequences. At some point, pretending becomes impossible. They can no longer tell themselves that this is just a passing feeling. They can no longer dismiss it as simple attraction. They can no longer pretend that your presence means nothing. The feeling has become too significant, and that is when they are forced to confront the deeper question. What exactly did you awaken inside them? Perhaps the answer is not simply love. Perhaps it is a part of themselves they had forgotten. A need for intimacy. A desire to be understood, a hunger for authenticity, a longing to finally feel safe enough to be real. Your presence may have exposed those needs. And that can be terrifying for someone who has spent years convincing themselves that they do not need anyone. They may have built an identity around independence, around control, around emotional distance, around never allowing anyone to see their weaknesses. Then you appeared, and suddenly, the walls began to crack. At first, the cracks may be small. They almost tell you something. They almost admit how they feel. They almost reveal a secret. Then fear takes over. They retreat. Sometimes they retreat even more strongly than before, because they are frightened by how much they have revealed. They are not necessarily afraid of you. They may be afraid of themselves. They are afraid of losing control. They are afraid of becoming vulnerable. They are afraid of needing someone. And they are afraid of what might happen if they finally stop fighting their emotions. This creates a cycle. The closer they get to you, the stronger their anxiety becomes. The stronger their anxiety becomes, the more they withdraw. The more they withdraw, the more they think about you. And the more they think about you, the stronger the emotional attachment becomes. Then the cycle begins again. Outwardly, they may appear calm. They may continue working. They may continue socializing. They may act as if everything is normal. But beneath that surface, their internal world may be completely different. You have created a contradiction they cannot easily resolve. They want your presence. But your presence threatens the emotional defenses they built to protect themselves. They feel connected to you. But connection requires vulnerability. And vulnerability is exactly what they fear most. This is why the situation may actually be more profound than ordinary emotional stress. It may feel like a crisis of identity, because approaching you could require them to become someone different, someone more honest, more open, more vulnerable, more authentic. That version of themselves may feel unfamiliar and dangerous. But running away does not necessarily solve the problem. The emotional weight follows them. It can transform into regret, longing curiosity, and one question that refuses to disappear. What would happen if I let this connection go? That question can become haunting, because sometimes the fear of losing something becomes greater than the fear of pursuing it. Eventually, they are left with two difficult choices. They can confront what they truly feel, or they can spend years trying to bury it. But buried emotions rarely disappear completely. They often return in unexpected moments, during dreams, during quiet nights, while driving, while listening to a familiar song. When something unexpectedly reminds them of you, the harder they try to suppress the thought, the more frequently it may return. And that brings them closer to their breaking point. A human mind can tolerate uncertainty for only so long. Eventually, it demands an answer. Before that answer arrives, however, there may be a strange period of silence. Their thoughts become still. Their usual excuses stop working. Their emotional defenses become exhausted. And suddenly, the truth becomes impossible to avoid. They already tried distance. They already tried distraction. They already tried convincing themselves that the feelings were imaginary. But truth does not disappear, simply because it is inconvenient. Eventually, they may realize that the real struggle was never about controlling their emotions. It was about facing what those emotions revealed. And what those emotions revealed may frighten them, because your presence may have exposed a deeply neglected part of their life, a part that wants intimacy, a part that wants acceptance, a part that wants to experience life honestly. That realization can destroy an old narrative. They can no longer hide behind logic. They can no longer say this is only physical attraction. They can no longer avoid the question, why am I drawn to this person? Why does this connection feel strangely familiar? Why does being around this person make me feel something I have not felt before? The answers may be complicated, because emotional connections are often connected to our history, our experiences, our wounds, our fears, our hopes, and sometimes another person becomes a mirror through which we finally see ourselves. You may have become that mirror for them. You may have shown them not only who they are, but who they could become. And that realization can hurt more deeply than simple attraction. Because caring about you may force them to mourn a version of themselves they never allowed to exist. A version that was open, fearless, honest, capable of genuine connection. A version that did not run whenever things became emotionally difficult. This creates an almost unbearable dilemma. Every moment spent avoiding you may feel like betraying that hidden version of themselves. But moving toward you means stepping into uncertainty. And uncertainty is exactly what they have spent years trying to control. Now they understand something important. There is no completely safe option. Walking away means losing the connection. Moving closer means surrendering some of the control they have worked so hard to maintain. And both choices require sacrifice. If they walk away, they may eventually experience regret. Not necessarily because they lost you, but because they lost the opportunity to become someone different. That regret can remain for years. It can become a quiet reminder of the road they never took. But if they move toward you, they must abandon the protective identity they created. They must accept vulnerability. They must admit that emotional exposure cannot always be avoided. And to someone who has built their entire life around control, surrendering that control can feel terrifying. That is the true climax of this emotional struggle. The defenses begin to collapse. The excuses lose their power. And one reality remains. Their feelings are not simply about romance. Something inside them is changing. And transformation is rarely comfortable. Real transformation destroys old beliefs before creating new ones. It forces people to confront their lies before they can embrace the truth. It demands honesty before intimacy. It requires courage before freedom. That is why this experience may feel so intense. It was never supposed to be easy. Its purpose is not simply to make them fall for you. Its deeper purpose may be to force them to confront themselves. And here is the most important truth. They may not have chosen the emotions that appeared inside them, but they can choose what they do with those emotions. That decision will shape them. It will influence their present. And it may influence their future. People do not always remember the emotions they successfully avoided. They remember the emotions that forced them to grow. So perhaps you are no longer simply a person in their story. Perhaps you have become a crossroads, a moment that challenges the identity they built, a doorway into a reality they spent years avoiding. And now that doorway is open. They can move forward, or they can run. Both choices have consequences, but only one choice allows them to live honestly. And somewhere deep inside themselves, they may already know which choice is the right one.